Hi everyone, good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
Casey was looking bored as she passed her spoon around her plate. Tony watched her patiently for 5 minutes, but even his strong nerves finally gave way. "Casey, what fly bit you this morning?" The girl rolled her eyes theatrically. "Daddy, in our house, no fly can't stand it. They all die of boredom on the fly." Tony gently pushed the empty plate away from him. "Watch your mouth. You've been out of control lately. You talk like a street hick. I don't like it." The man threw a meaningful glance across the long table, but the 12-year-old provocateur didn't even raise an eyebrow. After waiting a few seconds, she said defiantly, "I don't like this house. It looks like a crypt. Also, I'm sick to death of this mess. How many times have I told you to tell Annabelle to make something else?" The housekeeper stood mutely by her master's side. After the girl's words, she shuddered as if electric wires had been connected to her. Tony stood up abruptly. "Casey, as long as you live in this house, you will eat and drink what they give you. You are not old enough to change the order here, you understand." Casey looked at her father and mumbled, "Got it?" There was an oppressive silence in the dining room. The girl began to eat her porridge with demonstrative squeamishness, but in her mind she was calculating how long it would take her father to cover the distance from one end of the long table to the other. The results of the math were disappointing, and Casey decided not to make her father angry anymore. Noticing that his daughter was subdued, Tony sat down again. "Annabelle, you can serve the coffee." The housekeeper rushed toward the kitchen and returned immediately. With a tray, also without a word, she placed a cup with a steaming drink and a miniature creamer in front of the owner. "And coffee for me?" Casey's voice sounded pleading. Something in the man's heart trembled, but he did not fall for his daughter's ploy and said sternly, "You, Annabelle, will have cocoa made for you when you've had your porridge. Caffeine is bad for you at your age, and by the way, you shouldn't be so dismissive of oatmeal. Even the royal family traditionally serves it in the morning." Casey snorted loudly. "Dad, you think you've been to breakfast at Buckingham Palace. And anyway, the mayor of Washington, D.C., is as far from the Prince of Wales as he is from the capital of China." A man's heavy fist came down on the natural oak tabletop. "Casey, what's with the language? I don't understand what you are trying to accomplish. For your intolerable behavior today, you will be punished." Tony turned to the housekeepers. "Annabelle, make sure this young lady doesn't run off anywhere." The housekeeper stretched out again and looked at her master with a submissive look. "All right, I'll see to it. We have English today. You're about to give her a good workout. I think a strict regimen will do my daughter some good. She's been acting up." Tony left the huge dining room, and soon his brisk footsteps echoed ominously throughout the house. Casey wanted to burst into tears, but she struggled to hold them back. "Do you want cocoa?" Annabelle bent in a half bow. Her whole demeanor said she was ready to do whatever she wanted. It was this obligingness that irritated the teenager more than anything else. The girl stood up and kicked the chair with her foot. "I don't want anything else. And don't mess with me with your English. And in general, leave me alone." Casey still couldn't help herself and tears broke through the dam of patience. She ran to the second floor to lock herself in her room. An executive Annabelle tried to catch up with her. "Casey, wait, you know your daddy doesn't like to be crossed. If I don't follow his instructions, he will fire me." The girl stopped outside her room and raised both hands in the air. Imitating the fanfare, she sang triumphantly, "Tay, yes, yes, ladies, this will be the happiest day of my life. Annabelle, I'm as bored with you as I am with oatmeal. It's as bland as you are." The door slammed shut in Annabelle's face, and soon the sounds of music came from the landlord's daughter's room. Annabelle tugged the doorknob and said in a slightly audible voice, "Little viper, just like her late mommy." Annabelle had worked at the family house for almost 10 years. Her career as an educator didn't take off right away. After graduating from university, she had gotten a job at an elite gymnasium with a great black, where in her first month of work, the young teacher had a conflict with a student of the graduating class. She was then only 22, and the student, whose last name she did not remember, only 16. The guy was insolent to the point of lawlessness, and each of her lessons turned into a rousing show. Annabelle tolerated the bullying of little kids, hoping that they would soon get tired of this kind of entertainment, but the guy could not calm down. One day he went to the extreme, and when the teacher invited him to the blackboard, the guy clenched her in his arms, saying, "Baby, let me do my lesson. I assure you, you'll love it." He laughed hysterically while the young teacher burned with shame. Her defensive reaction worked spontaneously, and barely freeing herself from the embrace of the underachiever, she slapped him with a ringing slap. Payback followed that same day. The director of the educational institution invited Annabelle to his office and immediately began to yell, "Annabelle, what do you allow yourself? To let your fist in our gymnasium is unacceptable." And what was left for me to do? This young scumbag in front of the entire class began to spread his hands. The principal looked contemptuously at the young teacher. "And you expect me to believe you? But it doesn't matter. We don't need that kind of personnel. Do you even know who the father of the boy you beat up is?" Annabelle screamed, "I didn't hit him, just slapped him." The principal frowned. "I don't think arguments are appropriate in this situation. Write a statement." Annabelle had no other choice, and she wrote a statement immediately in the office. The graduate of a prestigious university, who was doing an internship in Great Britain, was hoping for a quick job. For 3 months, she went to schools, kindergartens, and other institutions where her knowledge could be useful, but she was rejected everywhere. Desperate to find a job, she made an appointment with the mayor. When the aide asked about the purpose of the visit to the mayor, the girl lied. "I love our city very much, but it falls short of the regional centers by many indicators." The mayor's aide didn't even listen to the end. "You are right. I would like more comfort and cleanliness." Annabelle cheerfully picked up on this. "This can be easily achieved by involving young people." "That's a great idea. I think our mayor will appreciate your initiative. But the problem is that he's on vacation. So I'll refer you to Tony, the deputy mayor." But as soon as the visitor entered the official's office, her courage faded. The girl burst into tears. Tony couldn't understand what was wrong. "Calm down and tell me what your trouble is." Stammering, Annabelle said, "Please help me a little more, and I'll starve to death because I have no means of subsistence." The deputy mayor shrugged his shoulders in confusion. "Girl, don't talk nonsense. There are plenty of empty vacancies in our city. What's your educational background?" Annabelle took out her documents from her purse. The official opened her diploma, then her labor book, and grinned. "Yes, you have a very impressive record, to put it bluntly, only a month. Tell me why you left the gymnasium." Annabelle told the man everything to her heart's content. Tony wrote something in his diary and told her to look at it. The next day, Annabelle showed up at the reception desk of the town hall at the exact hour, but Tony waved his hands. "Unfortunately, I don't have anything to tell you yet. The father of the student with whom you had the incident has blown the story wide open, so no school in the city wants to see such a conflicted specialist." Annabelle wandered home with nothing. She had the desire to leave this world because she did not see a way out of the situation. But the girl did not have time to fulfill her plans, because just a couple of hours after her visit, Tony himself called the mayor's office. "Annabelle, given your difficult situation, I can offer you for the time of governess work. My wife is seriously ill and we have a young daughter. Of course, it's not exactly prestigious, but at least this way you can earn a living." Annabelle agreed right away. She was in a truly catastrophic situation and had forgotten her ambitions. Tony's wife Lucy welcomed the girl warmly. "Although my husband and I did not plan to hire staff, but circumstances made us reconsider this decision. Soon we are moving to a new house, so I really need a responsible assistant. I hope we will become friends." The landlady had a pleasant timbre of voice. It put Annabelle's guard down a little, but when Lucy looked at the girl, she involuntarily shivered, so unpleasant was the look of Tony's wife. Then she thought for the first time that she was unlikely to find common ground with this woman. Annabelle's intuition did not fail her. Lucy, during her husband's absence and most of the day the owner was at work, invented for the housekeeper the most sophisticated abuse. But Annabelle tolerated everything because she had nowhere to go, because she had no relatives. And her third aunt told her after she graduated from high school, "That's it, my dear niece. I've been pulling you as long as I could. Now you can manage on your own. I am still a young woman and I want to arrange my personal life. And on these square meters, you understand, it is impossible to realize." Her aunt had a one-room apartment, and for several years Annabelle lived in the kitchen. After graduation, the girl never once visited a relative, although Aunt Nancy lived not far from Washington. Having settled gymnasium, she immediately rented a room, hoping to engage in the arrangement of personal life. But these plans were not destined to come true, so working in the family home eliminated a number of problems, and Annabelle was very afraid of losing this place. For many years she tolerated the nagging mistress and did not notice how she turned into a silent creature, ready to fulfill any whim of her tormentor at the click of a button. Lucy was melting before her eyes. Her condition was rapidly deteriorating every day. She suffered greatly. She took out her irritation on the housekeeper and her little daughter. Therefore, when the mistress went to the next world one rainy fall day, Annabelle breathed a sigh of relief. From then on, she felt more at ease in her employer's house. But if Tony was happy with this state of affairs, his reckless daughter was unwilling to accept the rules. And the older Casey got, the harder the governess's plight became. Nanny went to work as a holiday, and she tried to appear at her favorite institution early. The punctuality of the mayor's assistant was legendary, which further increased the self-esteem of the woman, who was not distinguished by the appearance of attractiveness. The main advantage of Nanny were business qualities, and the mayor once jokingly admitted, "Without Nanny, I would be lost. She is my light in the dark realm of bureaucracy." These words were said to Tony in a small circle of friends many years ago, but they became fateful for a young girl to whom the male sex paid little attention. Every morning she woke up and mentally repeated, "Nani, hurry up. Tony will be lost without you." At first this phrase was taken with humor, and over the years it became a motto. Repeating these words, Nanny gained confidence in her exceptionalism. She did not hesitate to point out to the chief his mistakes, could suggest the right decision. Nanny was never wrong in her predictions, so the mayor often consulted her on a number of issues. Thus, unnoticed by herself and others, Nanny gained the respect of everyone. She was never called a secretary, and she proudly wore this honorable title, assistant to the mayor. Of course, like any ambitious person, Nanny wanted more, and after Tony was widowed, she nurtured the dream of becoming his wife. Of course, the chief was unaware of his right-hand man's secret plans, but Nanny was working with her usual diligence, and she was almost certain that she would achieve her goal. The only slippery spot on this path was the chief's daughter. The girl didn't like her father's assistant right away. This little beast, as if able to read other people's thoughts at a distance, Nanny several times tried to befriend Casey, but all attempts ended in complete failure. Then the woman went on the sly and began to give the chief's daughter small gifts of rolls, cosmetics, and other trinkets. Casey easily figured out Nanny's maneuver, and in front of her father she said, "Aunt Nanny, if you're trying to buy me, you're wasting your time. This sucks. Don't waste your meager paycheck." Although the girl's words hurt Nanny's ego, she didn't even blink, but threw the ball at her opponent's goal. "Casey, what comes from the heart can't be measured in money. But unfortunately, young ladies like you have a bit of a skewed perception of reality and are focused on different values." Although Casey didn't quite understand what her aunt was saying, she felt it was her duty to resist her influence. But unexpectedly, Tony backed up his assistant. "You're absolutely right, Nanny. My daughter has been talking a lot of nonsense lately, and I often have to blush for her. So please don't take offense." Without realizing it, Casey had helped the woman who was trying her best to take her mother's place. Nanny sighed and switched to work. She was watering the flowers when Tony burst into the waiting room. Nanny realized from the chief's burning gaze that he was in a bad mood today. She instantly removed the duty smile from her face and said in a clear, official tone, "Tony, today at 9:30 today you have a conference call with the chiefs, and at 11 o'clock you have to call the governor." Tony threw a short one. "I'm aware of that, but thanks for reminding me." He walked confidently into the office, but immediately returned to the reception area. "Nanny, if you don't mind, prepare a report on work with large and low-income families, orphans, and others in need of social support. But don't go into too much detail, just a general outline." "Okay, Tony, I'll do my best." The mayor's eyes warmed. "Thank you, Nanny. I don't know what I'd do without you." The woman's heart fluttered with happiness after the chief's encouraging words, and pleasant thoughts flowed again in a measured stream. "My dear, I'll do anything to make you happy. You don't even know what a woman in love can do." Tony had long since forgotten about earthly matters. Every day he was obliged to deal with important problems for the city, so he had no time to be distracted by personal matters. On this day, the mayor's plans also went awry when the governor called shortly after the conference call. Listen, Tony, you got a children's art center opening coming up. A thought flashed through Tony's mind. Someone's already reported it. But out loud, you reported cheerfully. That's right, Hugh, but we haven't decided on a date yet. You're pulling the cat out of the bag. What's the reason for the delay? You know that the objects of social importance are our first priority. Hugh's displeasure could be felt even from a distance. Tony tried to get a word in, but the governor continued to denounce him for slackness, indifference, and other sins. What are you in the governor's office for? That's right, to bring order to my city. And your DC wasn't and isn't in order. This Dane center was supposed to be completed in the spring, and it's summer already. What's the problem? Finishing crews can't keep up. So give them a whip or $1, I don't care. Anyway, I'm giving you exactly 1 week to fix it. I hope you haven't forgotten that your Washington, D.C. City Day is coming up. I haven't forgotten, Hugh. Good. When the center opens, bring in some high-profile guests, invite some sponsors. It's a good idea to get your family involved. It'll be homey, warm, and touching. I promise you I'll send TV crews, and I might be there myself. Hugh was known for his tough temper, and Tony knew very well that his wishes should be taken as orders. He grumbled in his heart. I don't have enough to worry about without this center. Now I'll have to take personal control of this facility. Reconstruction of the old gymnasium had long been in the city's plans. In different periods, the old building wanted to be converted first for sewing workshops, then the local businessmen laid their eyes on it. But 5 years ago, Tony's predecessor said, as cut off, "This is where the kids are going to be practicing. This is fair, because the building was built a century and a half ago with donations from the citizens, and we should continue the traditions of our ancestors. And in fact, it will be symbolic." This idea of the former mayor was supported at the very top. There was even organized fundraising for the reconstruction of the old gymnasium. But as it often happens in our country, the actively started business soon stalled. After talking to the governor, Tony called his assistant. "Nani, I have a personal favor to ask of you. Work with our local businessmen. It's urgent." Nanny knew right away it was a hot potato. Why the urgency? Hugh pressed on. Tony sighed heavily. "I don't mean that. He's been rolling on me. But there's nowhere to get dressed, so we have to follow orders. So, in a week we'll have the grand opening of the Children's Art Center. The governor ordered that everything should be of the highest order, and he should die but do it." The assistant said it with confidence. "We'll do, Tony. It's not the first time we've had to break through." Tony looked at the woman with gratitude. A second praise, only at the same time mourning. Nanny was ready to roll mountains after such a powerful impulse. She immediately took out her secret list from her desk drawer and started calling potential sponsors of the upcoming event. The mayor admired his assistant for a few more minutes. For the first time in his head, a short flash flashed a thought: with such an enterprising woman, no difficulties are not terrible. But this thought quickly fled without being stored in the man's memory. Tony returned home late, although he was very tired after a hard day's work, but his mood was on the upswing. He had time to visit the site that had interested the governor so much. Contrary to expectations, the work there was quite active, and when he told the foreman that it was necessary to finish the job in just a week, he cheerfully said, "Don't worry, we'll make it in time." As always, Annabelle met the owner at the entrance. Tony gave her a fleeting glance and thought, two women about the same age and so different. Nanny is confident, yes insolent, and this one looks like a boiled fish afraid to say a word. The man took another look at the housekeeper. "Annabelle, get Casey. I'll be in my office." The daughter did not wait long. She entered her father's office with a light breeze. "Daddy, you called for me." Casey's posture, as well as her careless smile, expressed a challenge to everything around her. But Tony decided to ignore his daughter's antics. He asked gently, even warmly, in a homely way, "Casey, what are you willing to do for a friend?" The girl obviously didn't expect such a question. "Daddy, are you all right?" The man grinned. "Do I look like a crazy person?" "No, you don't look like one, but you ask such strange questions." "It's a normal question about friendship." Casey sat back in her chair and hugged her father. "Dad, you won't believe this, but I don't have any friends that I can be in fire and water with. Everyone at school just pretends I'm the mayor's daughter. Even the teachers openly fawn over me. Honestly, I'm sick of it. I wish I had a sister or a brother." Tony did not expect such a frank confession. He kissed his daughter gently on the forehead. You and I are in about the same position. Many of my subordinates also ingratiate themselves with me. True, not all such. There are quite confident individuals, ready at any moment to come to the rescue. These are the kind of people I'm used to trusting. Casey grinned. You mean, Nanny? Daddy, that woman has other plans for you. I've seen the way she's been eyeballing you. I bet she's trying to marry you off. Casey, if you keep throwing your teeth around like that, you're gonna have to get dentures. The girl sighed with relief, and her father continued. Okay, that was a little joke. Let's get down to business. The children's center is opening in a week, and I want you to help me. Casey darted her eyes around in surprise. Dad, what do I have to do? It's nothing complicated. You just have to give a little moving speech. I'm sure you'll be great at it. You'll talk about family, friends, helping each other. Think of it as a personal mission for you from the governor. He's even promised to send TV crews. Wow. Casey wheeled around the office, then gave her father a kiss. Our people are gonna be so jealous when I'm on TV. Daddy, I'm in, but you know, I'm gonna need the right outfit. What? Tony looked at his daughter in surprise, but after a second, he palmed his own hand. Okay, I get it. You mean a suit? Well, yes, you can have a classic dress. In short, something strictly so everyone would think I was a good girl and a model student. Tony didn't think his 12-year-old daughter could reason like an adult. Casey, you got it all figured out. Now all that's left to do is prepare for the event. Dad, why do I have to rack my brain? I'll tell Annabelle, she'll help me. You do the clothes and the speech, or better yet, you tell her. Casey smiled contentedly and disappeared out the door, and Tony thought wistfully. How quickly his daughter had grown up. She's all on her own, making her own decisions. After his daughter left, the man invited Annabelle in and briefly explained what was required of her. The young woman was embarrassed because it was the first time in 10 years that she had received such unusual tasks from her master. Tony, I don't even know what to say. I don't want to let you down, but I'm afraid I can't do it. I've forgotten everything I learned at university. Tony got angry. Is it so hard to find a suitable dress for a girl and write 2 or 3 sentences? Why do you always doubt everything you need to be a little more confident, and sometimes it's good to take the initiative? Annabelle nodded a few times in agreement and slipped out of the office in a shadow. In her room, she cried from the despair in her heart. Master is right about everything. I am like an amoeba, not living, but existing. I can't go on living like this. Such impulses were not uncommon in Annabelle's humble life, because she was very afraid to change something in her life, because it is easy to go with the flow. Another city day went off on a high. Washingtonians were amazed at the magnitude of the celebration. In a small provincial town were deployed several thematic areas where children and adults could have a great rest. So, for people of the older generation, in the park was organized a dance floor where couples twirled under the brass band. The youngest citizens had fun on the rides, and music lovers enjoyed the creativity of visiting artists. But still, the real guest of the program was the long-awaited opening of the Children's Art Center. The governor himself came to Washington to say a few words. My friends, dear fellow countrymen, you know that any talent takes its roots from the native land, and I am sure that the opening of the center will open in the future new talents. Their names are still unknown to us, but they will surely glorify this land. That's why I present the symbolic key to the new center to the representative of the young generation of our beautiful city, Casey. The square erupted in applause, and Casey proudly ascended the stage. From all sides, cameras were clicking, but she looked only to the place where the cameraman from the regional television studio was working. The girl gracefully raised a beautiful phone key on her outstretched arms and without hesitation made her speech. I am glad that I had the honor of opening the Magic House. They say that every person is given a gift from birth, and for this gift to turn into a real talent, you have to work hard. Like a master jeweler polishes a diamond, and experienced teachers light small stars of talent in the sky. And may there be more of these stars over our Washington. A triumphant fanfare sounded, and the huge balloon-decorated doors of the renovated building swung open. Casey handed the key to the director of the cultural facility and finished her colorful speech. They also say that all children's dreams come true one day, and I would like to wish all the children from myself personally and from the city authorities don't be afraid to dream. The audience gave Casey a standing ovation, and it was her moment of glory. As soon as she came down from the stage, she was immediately surrounded by her classmates and acquaintances. "Casey, you're great, you're great. You made such a speech. When will you be on TV?" It was a question for a spell, and the girl confusedly answered, "I don't know. They didn't tell me anything." She wanted to ask Annabelle, who was next to her during the whole ceremony, but the governess disappeared somewhere. On the stage, the action continued, and according to the script, now the sponsors gave gifts to the newly opened center. They also said some farewell words. The audience clapped their hands vigorously. Casey suddenly felt dizzy and began to make her way through the crowd. She thought with annoyance, "It's Annabelle, you stupid chicken. How could she leave me? It's okay, I'll tell Daddy about her and he'll give her a nice life with pictures." The girl got out to the central square of the town, which for the duration of the holiday turned into a fair. Here, too, there was cheerful music, and people strolled leisurely along the rows of vendors. Very close by, Casey heard a familiar voice. She turned around and was almost stunned. Annabelle was walking next to the governor and talking sweetly with a strange man. The girl wanted to tell the housekeeper everything she thought, but she looked at her so expressively that she instantly forgot all the words. But the most amazing thing was that Annabelle spoke German to the strange man, and she did it so easily and freely, as if she had been born not in Washington, but somewhere near Berlin. They walked past the confused girl. Casey's mood vanished at once. Everyone around her was having fun, and she wanted to cry with resentment. She mumbled to herself in despair. Daddy's out somewhere entertaining the guests, and Annabelle's ghoul has found something else to do. I wonder what kind of uncle she was talking to so nicely. The answer to this question the girl received only late in the evening. Frustrated with everyone, Casey went home and locked herself in her room. She already imagined how the housekeeper would come back, and then her father, and would persuade her to sit down at the table. But soon Annabelle returned and immediately began rattling dishes in the kitchen. A short time later, her father rolled up to the house in his SUV, but he passed by his daughter's room and didn't even drop the usual as he went. "Casey, what's up?" This ignorant attitude of the people closest to her surprised and angered her at the same time. Therefore, Casey not the left her shelter. The girl really wanted to share her worries with her father, and at the same time to piss on the housekeeper. She had already gathered at the door of her father's study, but he himself came out. When Tony saw his daughter, he said, "Casey, you did a great job. Well done. Thanks for not letting me down. Well, we'll talk about the nice things later. Right now, I need to have a little privacy with Annabelle." "Who? Who?" The girl didn't realize that Annabelle was their housekeeper. She was unpleasantly surprised by her father's decision, and at first wanted to close herself in her room again to suffer alone with resentment, but then she changed her mind and tipped up closer to the kitchen. Casey knew it was wrong to eavesdrop, so she mentally reassured herself. It's okay to do it once in a while when it's in the best interest of the cause. Her intuition told her that her father was discussing something very important with the housekeeper, and since she was curious, she decided to ignore the rules of decorum. The conversation must have been in full swing, because Tony's voice shook with excitement. "Annabelle, I realize that you have to get your own life together, and frankly, I'm happy for you. Well, this is all so sudden. It's like you're leaving me and Casey to fend for ourselves." "You're exaggerating, Tony. I don't have much to do in this house, and Casey's a big girl. She can handle a light breakfast on her own. I'm sure you'll have no trouble finding a helper if you just click. Ask your secretary. She won't refuse you such a small favor." Casey had no time to digest the information she had received before she heard her father's approaching footsteps. She hurried to hide in the alcove between the kitchen and the bathroom. As a child, this secret corner had been her safe haven, where she could sit for hours. Her heart pounded frantically. The girl was afraid that the sound would attract her father. Contradictory feelings struggled in her soul. On the one hand, she was glad that this pale moth would finally get out of their house, but on the other hand, the prospect of doing everything herself did not flatter the stroppy girl. Her indignation at the governess's behavior got the best of her, and she waited until her father closed up in his study and walked confidently into the kitchen. Annabelle was standing at the stove, and without turning around, she said, "Dinner isn't ready yet. Be patient, Casey, about 5 minutes." "I don't want to be patient. Tell me, Annabelle, how could you betray Daddy and me?" "That man lured you." The housekeeper laughed. "Casey, you were eavesdropping. I didn't expect you to fall like that. And what uncle are you talking about?" The one you were talking to in German. I thought you only spoke English. Turns out you can speak German too. I can speak French and Italian too, in your lingo. Annabelle approached the girl, wanted to hug her pupil, but Casey dodged her embrace. Then the woman leaned against the wall and said in a tired voice, "Casey, there comes a time in every person's life when they want to change everything. That's what happened to me today. It's fate. I didn't even think things would change in one day. When you and I were going to the town festival, but it turned out that the interpreter of the guest who came from Germany suddenly disappeared. You saw him with the governor, the same guy you didn't like for some reason." Casey didn't know what to answer and unhappily sniffled. Annabelle laughed again. "By the way, this is a famous businessman, the head of a large concern. He wants to open a production facility in the regional center." Casey impatiently interrupted the housekeeper. "But let him open it. What's that got to do with you? This man offered me a job I didn't even dare to dream of." The girl had recovered from the shocking news. She sneeringly remarked, "I see. And you, Annabelle, like a sucker, fell for this German's divorce. He'll dump you the first chance he gets." "Casey, why do you choose the worst options? I can't spend my life serving you. I have to think about myself." Casey had no more valid arguments, and she left the kitchen with demonstrative contempt. "Dinner without me. I've had enough tonight." To pass the time, Casey turned on the laptop her father had recently given her. Until midnight, she corresponded with her friends on social networks. Someone had already uploaded a clip of her performance at the opening of the art center. She read the positive comments and her heart was filled with a pleasant niggle and a thought beat in her head. "I am a star. Now everyone will know about me. And let that stupid Annabelle get the hell out of here. Daddy will find a new employee." In the morning when Casey woke up, the house was very quiet. The girl felt an excruciating hunger and regretted that he had refused dinner the night before. She said loudly, "Annabelle, I'm awake now. Have we anything to munch on?" But no one responded to this call. Casey walked to the kitchen and saw a note on the table. "Casey, breakfast is on the stove. I made cottage cheese casserole today. I hope you like this dish more than oatmeal. Bon appetit. If it's difficult, call me." A cell phone number was written at the bottom in smooth handwriting. This time the attack of resentment was so strong that Casey felt a physical pain in the area of her heart. She started screaming hysterically, "I hate you. I hate everybody." Casey felt the resentment again and did not notice the tears rolling from her eyes in two thin streams. She roared and thought bitterly that if her mom were around right now, she wouldn't have let her only daughter get hurt. Casey didn't know that at this very time, only in a different town, a completely different girl was also roaring with hopelessness, and the reason for Lily's tears was Casey's colorful performance. True, the name of her doppelganger she did not know. Star video, thrown by someone's light hand in the network, just a few hours to break into the leaders of views, so Lily's phone burst from calls from classmates. But the girl had to listen to mostly unfavorable reviews. "Lily, we didn't know we had a double-bottomed girl in our class. You pretended to be a gray mouse, but you're a star, and the speeches you could make." Lily didn't have a laptop or a tablet because she and her mom lived very modestly, so she didn't have the opportunity to watch the video that caused so much noise. But after a string of calls from her classmates, she got a call from her classmate Maddie, who asked Lily sternly, "Please tell me why I'm the last to know about your adventures. It seems to me that you had an obligation to put me and the headmaster on notice before taking part in such activities." Lily tried to explain to her teacher that there had been some kind of mistake and she had never been to this very Washington, D.C. in her life. But Maddie yelled at her, "Don't play naive. In this age of technological advancement, everything secret is coming out very quickly. I'll see you and your mom in the principal's office tomorrow to explain yourself." Betty was frightened when she came home from work to find her daughter in tears. "Lily, who hurt you? You know you're not supposed to get upset." Lily Mama was not unreasonably afraid for her daughter's health. The girl from an early age was very sick and often, and at the age of 5 she was diagnosed with a heart defect. Doctors said that the pathology is congenital in nature, and there is a high probability that the defect will eventually heal. But a positive prognosis was possible only if Lily ate well and guarded against colds. The list of prohibitions included negative emotions, so Betty strictly monitored her daughter's daily regimen. She did not allow her to watch horror movies, also carefully selected literature for reading. The woman began to scrutinize her daughter's room, trying to guess what exactly brought Lily to tears. But the girl had already come to her senses a little. "Ma, I didn't watch bad movies or read detective stories. I'm just sick of the phone calls. Everyone's calling about some commercial on the internet." Lily tried to tell her mom what had happened, but Betty couldn't make sense out of her daughter's rambling story. "Lily, what commercial? And what does this have to do with Washington, D.C.? I know roughly where the city is, but I have nothing to do with this settlement. We're going to go to the neighbor. They have a computer, and together we'll watch the damn video that caused such a commotion." The neighbor didn't refuse him a small favor and even volunteered to help. She quickly found the right material. "Here it is, your movie about a children's center in Washington." The three of them watched the 2-minute clip, shot on a cell phone, and were silent. Betty didn't want to believe what she was seeing. "No, it can't be true." Aunt Kathy contradicted her. "Betty, there are other things in the world that happen. Have you heard that there is a town somewhere, I think in Brazil, that is inhabited by only twins?" The neighbor wanted to add more intrigue, but Betty abruptly cut her off. "Kathy, what does Brazil have to do with Gemini? Don't talk nonsense. I don't want my daughter to get any of this nonsense into her head. That girl does look a lot like her, but it's obvious to the naked eye that it's not Lily. Just a slight resemblance, that's all." The neighbor is offended, pursed her lips, and turned off her computer. "Yeah, I don't really care. I'm not going to get involved in other people's problems. I've got enough of my own." All evening, Betty tried to distract her daughter from her unhappy thoughts, but the image of the girl from the video did not give her peace, and the inner voice kept saying, "Betty, you have to find out. It's not a coincidence, and you know it. Just you are afraid that suddenly new circumstances will open up and change everything in your life again." Medical professionals claim that everyone has phobias. Just in some they are hidden, that is, they do not manifest themselves in any way, and in others these fears run a pronounced form and greatly complicate the life of a person. Betty was haunted by panic attacks since childhood. She lost her mother early on, and then her father suddenly passed away. He was hit by a truck in broad daylight. Dad was returning from a fishing trip on a bicycle and followed all the rules, but the tragedy could not be avoided. The news that Harvey had been hit by the truck spread instantly through the settlement. 9-year-old Beatty ran to the scene of the wreck and gasped for air and the anxiety that overwhelmed her heart. But what she saw caused a real shock. The girl rushed to her father and cried out in terror, "Daddy, don't die, please. I'll be lost without you. I'll do anything for you, but don't die." My father was still alive and even tried to smile. "Nothing, we've been in more trouble than this, and now we'll get through." An ambulance arrived and the medics started to provide emergency aid. A strict paramedic shouted at the village women, "Why are you standing there like statues? Somebody take the child. She doesn't need to see this." Some strong hands picked up Betty and carried her away from the scene. She was hysterical. "Let me go to my daddy, he'll die without me." But a familiar voice tried to calm her. "Betty, don't scream. You won't help your father. They'll take him to the hospital and treat him there, and you'll stay with us for now." That voice belonged to a friend of Billy's father. Betty really wanted to believe this man, so she calmed down. But all night long she thrashed and screamed and had nightmares involving her daddy. She wanted to save him from the horrible creatures with burning heads, but each time the dream began again. In the morning, Betty had a fever, and Uncle Billy's wife nursed her back to health. The girl was sick for a week, and when she felt a little better, she learned that Papa had died. The same evening after the terrible accident, Billy took her to the cemetery and showed her father's grave. The next day, a relative of Mama's, who she had seen for the first time in her life, came to pick her up and took her away with him. They had a long train ride, and Uncle Rocky told her funny stories all the way. It was the mother's half-brother's tried and true way of distracting his niece from bad thoughts. "Betty, don't worry, you'll forget all the bad things in the new place. By the way, you have a little sister named Amy. She's my daughter. She's about 3 years older than you, but I'm sure you two will be friends." Uncle Rocky and his wife tried to surround Betty with love and care. With happiness they succeeded, and the girl slowly began to come around. A wonderful relationship with Amy, the daughter of the couple. But the past did not want to let go of Betty, and it appeared to her in dreams, and even during the day when the girl was alone. A year passed, then another, but these terrible dreams repeated with surprising regularity. Then Uncle Rocky decided to take his niece to a specialist. The child psychologist talked to her for a long time, then asked her to make some drawings on a given theme. Betty did not hear what the doctor said to Uncle Rocky after the test, but he prescribed her some beautiful pills to take twice a day. It was true that the medicine made Betty lethargic and absent-minded. Uncle Rocky wanted to show her again to the doctor, but already a different profile, but then on the defense of the poor orphan rose to his wife Aunt Annie. "Stop messing with the kid. She doesn't need those pills. We should show her to her grandmother and she'll be fine." Uncle Rocky didn't like that idea. "Annie, I never realized you were so dumb. Only a certified medical professional can be trusted with your health." The woman wouldn't give up. Doctors are often powerless, so do not neglect proven folk methods. I myself as a child from a fright grandmother treated me, and Bethy will help. I was given the address of a woman who said she cures everything. Annie, that's nonsense. Even the most experienced doctor can't cure everything. That's why people turn to witch doctors when doctors refuse to treat the hopeless. Uncle Rocky did not argue with his wife anymore and waved his hand. "Do what you want, but remember, you will be personally responsible for the consequences." Aunt Annie was pleased with her victory and whispered to Betty, "On Saturday, you and I will go to a grandmother who will take away your fears. Don't be afraid of anything and don't listen to your uncle. He's a big man, but he's afraid of everything." Betty remembered very well a visit to an old woman who lived in a small village near the forest. This old woman whispered something over her for a long time, then sprinkled on her, but with conspired water. To her aunt she said, "The girl is badly frightened. We must bring her 2 more times." Aunt Annie promised. "Okay, we'll try to come." But after the first session, Betty felt better. She wasn't having bad dreams anymore, and she wasn't afraid to be alone in her room. Aunt Annie watched her niece for a while and then, unsure, she said, "That's it, my friend. We're not going anywhere with you. Stop torturing you. You've had enough of Bitterroot's grief. Live your life as a child and be happy." Betty tried very hard to follow her aunt's advice. She studied diligently at school, then entered a hairdressing course. Her older sister by that time had already graduated from medical school and was very surprised at Betty's choice. You could have found a more respectable profession. With your diploma, it was quite possible to enter the law or pedagogical institute, and you gave in to hairdressers. Betty had the ultimate answer. "I've always wanted to make people beautiful." In reality, the reason for this choice was that she was in a hurry to become independent as soon as possible. Her uncle and aunt had done a lot for her. These kind people had essentially replaced her parents. But as time went on, they grew old instead of young. Both of them developed health problems, and Betty just didn't want to burden them anymore. After graduating from college, she got a job at a beauty salon, and a good salary allowed her to rent a room. But every weekend the girl visited her relatives. The connection with them was not interrupted even after Betty married Chippy and moved permanently to another city with her husband. Betty was also very lucky, although he was a full 15 years older than her. Chippy was in the trucking business, and there was never a shortage of money in the family. Money. The family bought a 2-room apartment on the secondary market and began to dream of having a child. But the years went by, and with the continuation of the family, the matter never moved forward. The spouses began to go to doctors' offices, but after a thorough examination they heard the final verdict of the doctors. "I'm sorry, but you can't have children together." After the doctor's words, Betty experienced exactly the same shock as when she watched her dying father as a child. This time her hope was dying, and she would not accept it and decided to argue with the doctor. "Doctor, if we understand you correctly, you think that my husband and I are hopeless." The doctor cleared his throat for emphasis. "Exactly. But there are methods that give people the opportunity to become parents." "You are right, there are such innovative methods, but in your case, it is impossible to implement them because your husband is infertile. Usually in such situations we recommend donor material, but very rarely our clinics agree to this option. So what should we do?" The doctor was silent for a long time, then said in a tired voice, "I really want to help you. Believe me, I speak sincerely from the bottom of my heart. But the only thing that I can advise you is to take the child for upbringing." Chippy, who had been silent until then, asked quietly, "You mean you're advising us to adopt the baby?" "That's exactly right. And it's best to adopt a newborn. Believe me, in this case, the baby will become a real family to you." Chippy looked at his wife. "Darling, I think the doctor's right. If we make even one little person happy, life will not be wasted, I think. Betty didn't immediately accept her husband's decision. For a few months she hesitated, then decided to consult with her older sister, so a delicate issue, because Amy worked in this field and could not only give useful advice, but also provide substantial assistance. For the sake of meeting with her sister, Betty even took a vacation at work and went to the city where the most beautiful years of her life had passed. Amy met her sister at the train station and cheerfully informed her, "You're a very fortunate visitor. I mean our conversation with you." Betty didn't want her plans to be made public. She shushed her sister. "Amy, I don't think the train station is exactly the right place to discuss such matters." The relative waved her hand. "Believe me, no one here cares about you. Even if you talk loudly about something out of the ordinary, no one will turn around. And I started this conversation because I need to hurry up. We have a 2-month-old baby, a little frail, but active. She just got here the other day. And get this, there's already a waiting list to adopt this baby." Betty felt an inexplicable flutter in her chest. "Amy, what do? We have to do something. The first step is to get to know the baby. What if you two don't like each other?" Even though Amy was joking, Betty felt a strong thrill again. This happens to people when jumping into the water or flying a glider. But the young woman's fears were in vain, because the abandoned little girl, seeing her at once, smiled and began to make noise. Betty asked her sister uncertainly, "Amy, can I hold her in my arms for a while?" "Of course you can." Those few minutes the woman remembered for the rest of her life. As soon as the tiny body was in her arms, she felt an incredible burst of energy, her heart overflowing with love of universal proportions. The little girl smiled at her again and said something in her incomprehensible language. Unexpectedly, she kissed the child on the forehead. "I won't give you to anyone. From this day on, we'll always be together with you." But it's one thing to say it, another to do it. The paperwork for Lily's adoption took a long time. The bureaucrats from the army of officials kept finding some flaws or demanding new certificates. So the couple had to live in Amy's small apartment for a month. But the older sister assured that her family was used to the cramped quarters. "We spent 5 years in a 10-meter room in the dormitory, so we have not yet had time to get used to these chambers." Thanks to her sister's assistance, the family managed to get the adoption in a relatively short time. The 3 of them returned home. Betty thought all the way home, "It must be fate. Chippy and I are fabulously lucky that Amy works at the orphanage. If it hadn't been for her, there's no telling how long we'd have been looking for our baby. And now we have a little girl." The woman who had suffered so much fanatically believed that with Lily's arrival, the family would forever be at peace and happy. But these hopes were not justified, because Chippy could not accept someone else's child. The first year he tried very hard to become a father to Lily, but Betty saw that her husband does not do it out of the call of his heart. As the adopted daughter grew older and began to explore the world around her, the man became irritable. He stopped smiling and would come home when his daughter was asleep. Betty realized that something urgent had to be done to save the family. One day she said firmly, "Chippy, we've got to have a serious talk, because we can't go on like this." The man immediately went limp and sank down on the sofa. He wrapped his arms around his head, said with a kind of horrifying doom, "Betty, I'm sorry, but I didn't calculate my strength. I tried, but I can't accept this child. As soon as I approach her, the hammers start pounding in my temples. This is the girl for you, stranger." Betty had expected anything but that admission. With numb lips she whispered, "Chippy, what are we going to do now?" The man jumped up from the couch and kissed her hands. "Betty, let's take the baby back to where we got her from. She's still little and won't remember anything. She'll still have a chance to have a family." The woman interrupted her husband's optimistic speech. "Chippy, you make it sound like you and I borrow the doggy. You're sick of it, and now you want to give it to people you know. That's no way to act, even with a dog, you know." Betty didn't realize she was yelling. Her husband tried to calm her down. "Let's not get carried away right now. It's a very complicated issue that can't be settled right away. Chippy, I've already made up my mind. Lily, I'm not giving it back." The man realized that he would not be able to change his wife's mind and said with irritation, "Then I'll have to leave this house." In the morning, Chippy packed his things and, without saying a word to his wife, disappeared forever from her life. Met the former spouses 2 years later in court at the divorce proceedings. The man looked at Betty with undisguised arrogance. "Yeah, I guess being a single mom hasn't been good for you. You don't look so good." Betty wasn't going to get into an argument with Chippy, but she didn't miss the opportunity to jab him. "But you've gotten fat from the good life." Chippy blushed. "Betty, don't take offense. You better thank me for leaving you the apartment. You could say you did it for free." Such insolence outraged the woman to the depths of her soul, because she still continued to pay off the loan, which foolishly took out on herself when she and her husband bought the apartment. She reminded the man of this circumstance, and he immediately lost the desire to prove the woman's righteousness. The court hearing lasted a little over an hour, and the spouses were divorced by mutual consent. Betty fully assumed the responsibilities of raising a foster daughter, and Chippy voluntarily refused to fulfill this parental duty. Several years passed, and Betty learned that her ex-husband had remarried. Ironically, his new chosen one had 2 children from his first marriage. It was only once that they met by chance at the mall. Chippy was embarrassed and hurried to break up with his ex-wife as soon as possible. "Excuse me, I'm expected," the woman asked. Chippy, "Admit it, are you happy?" He shrugged his shoulders uncertainly. "I don't know, happy, I guess." Betty gave the man a long look and thought bitterly that each person had a different idea of happiness. It was uncomfortable to be in the barrow chamber-like capsule, and Nancy waited impatiently for the young nurse to free her from the confined space. The machine hummed above the older woman's head, and the monotonous hum made her feel quite uncomfortable. Even though she had been warned not to move or talk, she couldn't help herself. "Young lady, how long is this going to go on?" the nurse said cheerfully. "That's it, your torment is over. Now you can get up with the help of the girl." Nancy got up and started to get dressed. The nurse was writing something down in her chart and at the same time sharing her observations. "This is my 3rd year working here, and I never cease to be amazed. Clever people have invented this wonderful device, which allows you to detect any disease at the earliest stage, and patients are still dissatisfied. Is it so hard to be patient for just a few minutes?" Nancy realized the question was addressed to her. "It's not hard, of course, but it's very unpleasant to lie there and hear something buzzing above you. It feels like a needle is about to pop out of somewhere and stick into your brain." The girl laughed. "You have a rich imagination, a remarkable peculiarity for such a mature age." The patient grinned. "Thank you for sparing me. But it seems to me, colleague, that in a medical institution tactfulness is not always appropriate." The girl was surprised. "Are you a medical professional too?" Nancy replied with undisguised smugness. "I've given 45 years to medicine. These hands have taken more than 100 new lives." For convincing, the woman showed the nurse her heavy hands. The girl looked at her with respect. "The results of your examination will be ready in about 15 minutes. I'll bring them to your doctor myself." Nancy thanked the nurse and headed toward the office where her fate was soon to be decided. She sat comfortably on a vacant couch and waited for her turn. Nancy had lived for nearly 70 years and rarely complained about her health. In her younger years, she was a serious skier and was even a regional champion. Then, as she got older, her hobbies changed a bit, but physical activity was always the basis of her lifestyle. Colleagues at work often joked about it. "Our Nancy has a jet engine installed in one place. With that kind of activity, she'll be working until she's 100 years old." The honored midwife herself did not aspire to such terms and also jokingly replied to her girls, "About 100 years, I doubt, but I will work until you do not take me out of the department." When the time came to draw her pension, Nancy courageously declared, "I'll work a little longer. I'm bored inside 4 walls." Everyone knew the woman had no one but her niece. The clinic management went along with her and renewed her contract, and Nancy continued to share her invaluable experience with the young addition. But barely she passed the 7th decade, as healthcare with strong failure appeared weakness, severe dizziness, loss of appetite. For some time the woman wrote off these symptoms to age-related changes in the body, but then she began to lose weight, and this alarming sign could not be ignored. Her strength was melting away every day, and she had to take a well-deserved rest. To somehow distract herself from sad thoughts, Nancy at first took to reading books, then sought out friendship with women in the neighborhood. She believed that positive emotions would help her improve her health, but it didn't help, and her weight continued its rapid decline. It got to the point where she once fainted in a store. Only after that the woman decided to take her health seriously. She had already undergone a lot of examinations, but the doctors could not determine the cause of her ailment. This question did not give her peace at night, when she tossed from side to side without sleep, repeating, "Lord, why am I being punished in this way? What have I sinned against you?" Memory offered up a variety of transgressions, but they were all insignificant except one. Nancy tried to banish the unpleasant memories, but they began to trouble her conscience more and more. To rid herself of this obsession, she decided to consult a knowledgeable woman. Ashley was a very devout woman, always attending Sunday and holiday services at the local church. After listening to Nancy, she said, "You, my dear, need to take communion. Tell the priest about your sins, cleanse your soul, and believe me, you'll feel better." The neighbor spoke so convincingly that she believed her and together with her went to the service on Sunday. But at the most crucial moment, when she had to tell the priest about her criminal act, which she had committed 12 years ago, the woman faltered. She still remembers the piercing gaze of the priest and his words, "Repent, sister, and you will feel better." But instead of repenting, Nancy mumbled confusedly, "I'm sorry, I can't. Maybe some other time." Ashley later rebuked her. "You shouldn't do that, Nancy. Our sins are a burden on our hearts." Nancy Stefanovna timidly objected, "For sins are different, and perhaps my transgression is not so grave as it seems. I did it out of pure motives." "Tell me, what is your sin?" The woman was about to open the soul of the neighbor, but noticed in her eyes a light curiosity and thought, "If I didn't trust her, then Ashley shouldn't tell her secret. She'll spread the word around the neighborhood that Nancy was afraid to call herself a criminal. She shut herself away again, trying to find other ways to escape her obsessive thoughts. The office door opened. The nurse called her woman's name, walked on stiff legs to the desk where the doctor sat in a crooked cap. The doctor did not even look at the elderly patient and nodded carelessly to a chair. "Have a seat." The woman sat down and watched the doctor, who was writing something in illegible handwriting. 5 minutes passed like that. Finally, the doctor put aside the previous patient's chart and began to read the results of Nancy's examination. As he studied the report, his face grew increasingly grim. He looked at the patient and immediately averted his eyes. "Unfortunately, Nancy, I have nothing to please you. To be frank, the situation is very bad." The old woman felt her whole body tremble. "Do I have cancer?" The doctor was silent and looked toward the patient's window. I had to ask the same question again. "Doctor, do I have cancer?" "Yes, it's too late. It's advanced, it's metastasized, given your age." "Doctor, I understand. I've worked in medicine for almost half a century myself. Tell me, how much time do I have left?" "Alas, that's a question no one can answer. I don't advise you to set yourself up for an imminent end. With proper treatment, you can slow down the process and still have a few years to live. Make your loved ones happy." "I don't have any." "Thank you, doctor, for your frank answer. I'll think about whether I should be treated." The doctor was surprised. A woman. What can there be to think about in a situation where even one day is important? I'm writing you a referral for emergency hospitalization. "Doctor, can I come back tomorrow? I have some things I need to take care of." Nancy couldn't remember how she got to her apartment. She wanted to cry so badly, but there were no tears. She sat on the couch in a state of prostration until evening, then looked for her cell phone. Her familiar friends had long since forgotten she existed. She hadn't even called anyone, so the phone was waiting for the owner to remember it. In the dresser drawer, the woman frantically searched for her niece's number, saying, just as long as she didn't change her number. Fortunately, after the first beep, a familiar voice came through the receiver. "Aunt Nancy, is something wrong?" Nancy felt tears roll down her sunken cheeks in 2 streams. "Something's wrong, baby. They found out I have a bad disease. It's heaven's punishment. Lingering is a sin. Aunt Nancy, don't despair. I'll come and see you tomorrow." "Annabelle, I won't be home. They're putting me in the hospital." "It doesn't matter. I'll be there tomorrow, and I'm asking you not to fill your head with bullshit." Annabelle kept her word and showed up at her relative's room by lunchtime the next day. She brought with her 2 bags of fruit and juices. Kissing her aunt, she said, "Here's a stockpile of vitamins for you, so that it's all gone in 2 days." Nancy looked at her niece hopefully. "Will you come to see me again?" "Of course, how could I leave you alone?" "Annabelle, darling, why do you do me this favor? I treated you so piggishly the last time." Nancy burst into tears. Annabelle stroked her gray-haired head and soothed her like a child. "Don't cry, I don't hold a grudge, and it's been years. Why remember the past? The aunt objected. How can you not remember it if it doesn't give you peace? I'm exhausted with these memories. I never believed in magic and other nonsense, but now I do. My illness is a punishment for a terrible sin I committed when I was sane and strong in my memory. Annabelle was worried about her aunt's condition, but she was eager to tell her about her biggest secret, and her niece had to give in to her aunt. But as the woman told her of her terrible secret, she was gripped by terror. Annabelle, don't interrupt me, please. You're the only one I can trust. Maybe you can correct my mistake. And I'll try if I can. Nancy closed her eyes and began her confession. It was 12 years ago, except for 2 months and a few days. I was nearing the end of my shift when my shift girl called to say she had a family emergency. She asked me to cover for her, promising to work the shift for me. I agreed. There were only 7 women in labor and one 18-year-old fool who kept saying that she didn't need a baby. She ran out of the room several times and asked me to give her a pen and paper. She wanted to say no, but I explained the rules and she seemed to calm down. I had a cup of tea and was going to get some sleep. And then I got a call from the emergency room. A woman was brought in with contractions, but it's not the first time. Of course, I didn't get confused. I thought I could manage on my own. The baby was born very weak, squeaked once and died. Mommy's hysterical, said she's had echo 3 times. The first 2 times she had miscarriages, so the whole 3rd pregnancy she was in the hospital. She asked to go home for a couple days. It was my husband's anniversary and then labor started. I tried my best to comfort the poor woman, advising her to try again, but she said it was her last try because she was at the age limit. Nancy fell silent and Annabelle thought she had fallen asleep, but the woman wrinkled her nose painfully and asked for water. She removed her thirst and continued. While I was calming that mommy down, that girl who was going to write a waiver went into labor. And that's when I made a fatal mistake. I relied on my experience again and didn't call the on-call doctor. Although, what could help the district therapist in that difficult situation? The labor was rapid, and it turned out that the girl went with twins. The first child safely came into the world, immediately screamed, and with the second baby I had to struggle. While I was dealing with her, my young laboring girl started bleeding. The situation was critical, but my brain was working like a computer. The first woman was still in the delivery room, and I suggested she take the twin baby. There was no time to think about it, because it was urgent to call a team of resuscitators. That woman understood the complexity of the situation and immediately agreed. She even promised to thank me generously. Then Nancy paused again. Annabelle said, "Auntie is very tired. You need to rest. Don't worry. I'll sit here and then you can tell me what happened next." The woman smiled wryly. And what happened next was nothing special. The young mother was sent to the intensive care unit, but she could not be saved. The girl initially did not plan to become a mother. She was not registered in the antenatal clinic. Later it turned out, girlfriends said that she tried several times to get rid of the pregnancy, but the twins turned out to be very tenacious. And how you thank the happy mom? Aunt again grinned. She didn't. I found her later in Washington. Turns out, this lady was the wife of a big boss. When she saw me, she started yelling all over the street that I was an extortionist, threatened to call the cops. And how'd that turn out? Nothing. I gave up and wished her well. Then I met her a lot in the city, but she'd always pretended she didn't know me. But I'm proud to, so I didn't try to be friends anymore. True, at first I had a keen desire to tell everything to the husband of this lady, but then I changed my mind. I imagined how they would take out their anger on the little girl and lost all desire to defend the truth. The more the aunt opened the veil of secrecy, the clearer the picture became for Annabelle. She compared some of the known facts and realized who the woman was. The fate of the second child remained unclear, but Nancy shook her head. Annabelle, that's the thing that weighs on me the most. I would probably give the remaining days of my life without regret to know anything about the second girl. The only thing I know is that the girl was sent to nursing because she was so weak. What happened to her after that, God only knows. Annabelle returned home with a strange feeling of emptiness. She didn't accuse her aunt of any crime, although what she had done fell into that category. I don't know what I would have done in my aunt's shoes. But how do I tie up the ends of one rope? There were many more questions Annabelle was trying to answer. She realized that no one gave her the right to interfere in the fate of people, but she could not remain indifferent. For a moment, she imagined how she would carry her aunt's secret for many years and realized that she had to do everything to reunite her sisters. Autumn had come unexpectedly this year. Yesterday the sun was shining brightly, not sparing its warmth, but in the morning the sky was covered with clouds, and it began to pour tedious rain. Lily looked out the window. "Mom, why is everything in life so unfair? I thought the weather would be nice on September 1, but it's so nasty outside, I don't even want to go out." Betty smiled. "There's a famous song that says that nature has no bad weather. That's in the song, but in real life it's different. It's good for you, Mama. You're going to hide in your parlor, and I'm going to be stuck in the rain on the line." Betty put the scrambled eggs on a plate. "Sit down, my sufferer, to breakfast to share your grief. I'm off to school for the line too." Lily hung around her mother's neck. "Oh, that's great. Too bad we don't have a camera, or you take a couple shots of me." The woman smiled enigmatically again. "Now if I could have your attention, we're about to have a magic show." "Receive, Lily, the phone." The girl was speechless when she saw a small box in her mother's hands. "Mommy, it's incredible. A real smartphone is so cool, but it's very expensive." Lily pushed the box away from her. Betty reassured her daughter. "Don't worry, it's fine. I paid off all my loans and decided to give you a grown-up present. By the way, I've gotten a few regular clients that I do in-home styling. They pay me a little extra for special favors." Lily lost her appetite and couldn't take her eyes off the marvelous box. "Mom, when I grow up, I'm gonna buy you a car. No, I'll give you a whole parlor and you'll own it." Betty wanted to thank her daughter for her good intentions, but she didn't have time to do it because Lily suddenly asked, "Mom, do you think that girl you know, who looks like me, does she have her own smartphone?" The woman was surprised. "Lily, why do you remember that girl?" "I dream about her sometimes. She says we're sisters." While Betty gathered her thoughts, Lily continued, "One time I dreamed we were walking together. Then she asked me in my dream to come visit her. She lives in Washington." "Daughter, they're just dreams. You shouldn't believe them." The girl was eating an omelet, so she couldn't give a coherent answer. "I've read that dreams are true when everything comes true, down to the last detail. Mom, after all, there's nothing stopping you and me from going to Washington. I looked it up on the map. It's not far from here. We could walk," Betty said as sternly as she could. "I don't think we ought to get off our asses because of a commercial. At least I don't have any plans to go on a trip like that right now. Come on, finish your breakfast and let's go." All day long, this conversation with her daughter kept Betty on her toes. As she served a customer, she thought about that other girl. The thought was so thick in the woman's mind that she couldn't stand it anymore and called her sister. "Amy, I need to ask you something." "So what's up?" "Tell me what's on your mind." "You know, it's awkward on the phone." Amy sighed. "Secrets again." "Well, let's do it on Viber, or call me on Instagram." "Sis, you know my finances are tight." "Oh wait, I can ask my roommate." "Great, call me tonight and we'll talk." At the appointed hour, Betty told her daughter she had to go out for a while. Lily didn't mind. She was engrossed in her new smartphone. "Mom, don't worry, I won't be bored. You can even go on a date. Aren't you tired of staying at home all the time?" The woman muttered. "You're too young to give advice to adults." Trying not to make too much noise, Betty rang the next doorbell. Aunt Kathy looked at her in surprise. "Betty, what's the matter with you again?" "No, we're fine. We just need your help again." To sweeten the awkward moment a little, the visitor took out a luxurious box of chocolates. The neighbor smiled. "Oh my God, walnut truffles. I'm an avid fan of this treat." "Thank you, Betty. You're welcome. So what's the problem? You say you need to make a phone call to a friend." "No, not a friend, my sister. Just hold on for 6 seconds." Indeed, after some complicated manipulation, Amy appeared on the screen. She waved her hand in greeting. "Hi, Betty, to you and your roommate. Come on, tell me what's going on." Betty looked at the landlady with an expressive look, and she hurriedly spoke. "I'm going away. I won't disturb you. I'm going to make some tea." Betty made sure that there were no ears in the room and hurried to tell her sister what was going on. "Amy, try to find out where Lily came from and under what circumstances." 25 again. "Why are you raking up the past, your life and Lily's too, though modest, but quite settled? So you find out the truth, and what difference will it make?" "Amy, you see, some things have come to light that have made me take this step. The thing is, my Lily probably has a sister." Betty spoke briefly about that clip of the girl who is an exact replica of her adopted daughter. Amy didn't respond right away. I admit you shocked me, but I'll try to find out as soon as possible. Although it will be difficult for me to do it, because access to the archives is open only to a separate list of people, and I have not worked at the baby house for a long time. Yeah, have you told Lily yet that she's not your family? Not yet. No, I can't decide. And it's wrong, because that girl is the closest thing I have to family in the world. I understand. I'll be in touch in a couple days. Betty waited for the next session with a fanatical determination to get to the truth. Her patience was rewarded. Her sister called a day ahead of schedule. Betty, are you standing? Yes. Why? Then sit down. I have such news for you that you might not be able to stand on your feet. I've seen a lot of melodramas on TV, but I didn't expect to see a story like this unfold right in front of my eyes. Anyway, this morning I went on your assignment and ran into a lady who was also interested in the events of 12 years ago. Betty was tense, and her heart was pounding so loudly that she couldn't make out what her sister was saying. Meanwhile, Amy continued to spill the beans. We can't be 100% sure, but we can assume that your Lily is a twin. That is, she's the twin of another girl who's also being raised in a foster home. But it's kind of a complicated story, so I think you need to meet that woman and talk to her. Betty had not yet fully realized what her sister had told her. Confused, she kept repeating herself. Yes, of course. Anyway, I'll give you the lady's phone number, and you can arrange with her when it would be most convenient for you to meet. Casey didn't know what to do with herself. The beginning of the school year didn't make her happy, because the class was as boring as last year. She wanted to call Audrey, with whom she had a more or less friendly relationship, but then changed her mind. Audrey would sit on her ear and ramble on for an hour about her favorite person. I'd rather watch TV, even though there's only trash on the program. I can't wait for Daddy to get here. I've asked him so many times to take me somewhere, but he's always so busy. Casey paced from corner to corner for a while. Suddenly, she remembered Annabelle and almost cried herself to sleep. If I hadn't picked on her, she wouldn't have run away from us. Right now, I'd give anything for the oatmeal with raisins that only Annabelle could make so good. I wonder where she is now. Casey started rummaging through her desk drawer, where house reigned supreme. Where's the damn note? I remembered I didn't throw it away. Finally, after a long search, the girl retrieved a crumpled sheet of paper from under a pile of notebooks. She smoothed it out, saying, "Here it is, Annabelle's cell phone. Now I'm going to call her and tell her what I'm going to say to make it look believable. I'll tell her my English is a mess." Casey knew it wasn't a good reason to start the school year, but there were no other options, so she dialed her former governess's number with determination. Annabelle didn't answer right away. "Casey, I wasn't expecting your call. Is everything okay?" "Annabelle, hi, I wouldn't bother you, but my English is a mess." "Yeah, you haven't changed. You don't use literary words. If it's in your ear, I'm sorry. Honestly, I just wanted to hear from you, to see how you're doing in the capital of our region. I also really wanted to see you." Casey felt her eyes water and her voice trailed off. "I really want to see you. It's so bad being alone. Daddy's always busy, and the new housekeeper comes every other day. She cleans and cooks well, but it was still better with you." "Casey, don't cry. I'll come to Washington as soon as I get a chance," the whiny little girl asked. "When will you get the chance?" "Maybe even at the end of this week." "Don't cry. I'm begging you." Okay, I'll try." After a short conversation with Annabelle, Casey's mood improved a little. She decided to please her father and set the table for dinner. Tony was surprised. "Daughter, are you all right?" "Yeah. If it's a surprise to you that I decided to do a little housekeeping, I'll admit that I benefited from Annabelle's call." "Annabelle called you, and how's she doing?" "I don't know the details, but she said she's doing well. She's working at the company as a translator, and she's not getting married yet." "Wow, you even specified that question. Did you ever think about the fact that it's inappropriate for young girls to ask about other people's personal lives?" Casey put her hands on her sides and asked defiantly, "Daddy, is it decent to leave the only daughter alone in this huge house? I'll soon die of boredom." Tony realized that the conversation was taking on an unpleasant tone. "Daughter, I promise that on the next weekend you and I will have fun together. If you want, we'll go fishing or go to the regional center. There is a lot of entertainment there." Casey looked at him mischievously. "We'll go fishing next time, but this Sunday we'll go to the park with you." What are we going to do there? You're going to relax and watch your daughter work, Daddy. I've been asked to host the fall ball, which will be held in the park. I'll wear the same dress I wore with Annabelle at the art center opening. Tommy loved the idea of a day out. Thank you, daughter, for the invitation, but you must realize that my persona will attract attention. No, it's not a problem. Let's just say you talked me into it. Both father and daughter were looking forward to Sunday. The event was scheduled to open at 11 o'clock, but Casey left the house an hour early. Dad, try not to be late or you'll miss all the fun. The man watched from the window as his daughter gracefully walked around the puddles left by yesterday's rain. He had always enjoyed this activity, and now he admired the girl with a thrill in his heart. She's all grown up. Soon, like a bird, will fly away from this house, and you, Tony, will be all alone. Although he had long ago given up on himself, but as the years passed, the thought came into his head more and more often that it was a mistake not to organize his personal life. The man threw on a stern jacket and looked at his reflection critically. Mayor Washington is a human being, and he probably deserves some consideration and understanding. The park was already crowded with citizens. The event was only minutes away, and Tony tried to find his daughter with his eyes. Suddenly, on one of the paths, he spotted his own face and waved. But strangely, his daughter did not respond to his greeting and even turned away. The man muttered, "What's the matter? Didn't she notice me?" His high status didn't allow him to shout and do other things that could be taken the wrong way. So Tony headed towards the path where his daughter had flashed by. He was greeted by the townspeople and responded to everyone with a smile and warm words. This distracted the mayor, and he finally lost sight of his daughter. Suddenly, a woman's voice sounded very close by. "Lily, move aside. Can't you see you're disturbing people?" Tommy abruptly turned around and froze in amazement. There was a girl standing in front of him who looked just like Casey, except her hair was shorter and her outfit was different. For a moment, his eyes were dizzy, but he was brought out of his unpleasant state by the same female voice. "Man, you're not well. You've turned so pale. Lily, give me some water." See, the man's sick. Tony looked at the woman, then at the girl named Lily, and squeezed his eyes shut. When he carefully opened his eyes, it was the couple still watching him. Triumphant music was heard from the side of the stage, and Casey jumped out onto the platform to a round of applause. "Hello, my beloved Washington. Today we have a holiday, and my friends and I want to give you all a good mood." A flurry of applause erupted over the park. Tony had yet to get far away from the mom with the girl who looked so much like his daughter. At first, this fact didn't even seem strange to him, and he wanted to walk closer to the stage. Lily said very loudly, Mommy, look, it's the girl from the video. Can I come closer? I'd really like to meet her." The woman tried to hold the girl back. "Lily, let's save the introductions for later. Your interference might interfere with the party." "Mommy, I'm just gonna watch quietly. Don't you realize that this is the girl who asked me to come in my dream?" The woman was confused and looked at Tony, hoping to find support. "Amazing resemblance, isn't it? Holiday holds very much like my daughter. I wonder how old she is." Something very painful squeezed the man's throat. He loosened the knot in his tie. "That's my daughter Casey. She was 12 in May." The woman rejoiced. "And my Lily's birthday is in early June. She and I, along with one other friend, made a special trip to your town." "And what exactly attracted you to DC, if it's no secret?" The woman didn't have time to answer because the host invited the mayor to the stage. Tony walked down the path again, only in the opposite direction, and behind him came a murmur. "You've seen the mayor's daughter. That's the girl with the balloons, looks just like her. The only way that's possible is if those young ladies are twins." The man heard everything. He had no right to respond to the remarks from the people, nor could he stop or leave the park altogether. During the short journey he made to the site of the upcoming performance, Tommy had time to change his mind about all sorts of things. He wasn't so naive as to believe in randomness, coincidence. Casey couldn't see or even guess what was going on down there. She was catching her next moment of glory at the ramp and basking in the applause of the grateful audience. When Tony came up on stage, she handed him the microphone and went off to the side. For many years of being in a responsible position, Tony realized that ordinary people most appreciate sincere words coming from the heart. He did not abuse the attention of the audience and briefly greeted everyone present. "On that beautiful September day, I would like to wish all of you, dear fellow countrymen, a festive mood. And let every house of our beloved city be bright and cozy. From the ringing children's voices, the holiday continued, and Tony began to think feverishly what he should do next. His head was splitting with all sorts of thoughts when he saw Annabelle next to him. Tony even forgot everything for a second because Annabelle struck him. Something very different about her, as if a compressed spring had straightened. Annabelle held her head high, looking straight and open. Seconds passed, and Tony let out a long sigh. It would be interesting, of course, to chat with her, to find out how she was doing. Right now, he didn't care about that at all. The man was just about to tell Annabelle that when Casey swept past him, she nearly knocked him off his feet, literally running into Annabelle. She smiled and hugged Casey. "So, are you still tearing down everything in your path?" A while ago, Casey would have taken offense, even responded rudely, but now she smiled. "Annabelle, did you see my performance?" "Of course I did, and I wasn't the only one." Annabelle looked over at Tony, who was looking for the girl his daughter looked so much like. "Tony, if you're looking for Lily and her mother, they're waiting for us at the waterfront cafe." The man slowly turned Annabelle around. He could feel the ground rocking under his feet. All the worst suspicions were beginning to come true. He shook his head. No, he doesn't want to know anything, much less change anything. Casey is his daughter, and he's not interested in any other situation. He was about to tell Annabelle that, but the thought suddenly popped into his head that maybe that girl was his daughter too. No, that was out of the question. He had gone with his wife several times for ultrasounds and had clearly seen one child there. "Annabelle, I'm sorry, but I can't make it tonight. Casey and I." Annabelle interrupted him. "Tony, we have to. You realize it's better to just talk. You're not being accused of anything. People just want to know the truth. And the man who caused all this to happen is very eager to absolve himself of this sin before he dies." Casey looked fearfully at her father. "Daddy, what is she talking about?" Annabelle smiled at her. "Casey, why are you scared? You've never been scared of anything. If your daddy's up to it, I'll introduce you to someone." Casey's in a pose. Actually, she has friends waiting for her. "I don't know, maybe I don't want to be anyone. I've got—" Tony interrupted Casey's daughter. "We're gonna have to go because I'm not gonna be able to sleep well now anyway." "Dad, what's going on?" He shrugged. If Mom were alive, she could probably shed some light on all of this. After he said that, Casey quieted down. Annabelle and Tony walked ahead, with Casey following. "Annabelle, what did you have to do with this?" "Me? No, my aunt. Yeah, we don't socialize enough for me to know the details, or I used to. And now my aunt's dying. She really wanted to know if the other girl was alive. It just so happened that we all met at the same moment, and together we were able to find out a lot of interesting things." The man was at a complete loss. He simply did not understand what he was about to hear, but he knew one thing for sure. Nothing good. They approached the summer cafe and then they heard, "Mommy, look, there she is." Casey stopped. She stared at the girl, then looked at her father. "Dad, who's that? I thought it was just a dream. I've dreamed about her several times." Tony put his arm around his daughter. "Casey, I don't know anything yet myself. Hopefully, it will all become clearer now." He shifted his eyes to Lily's mother and froze. Betty, the woman who had been looking at Casey with a kind of greediness, slowly shifted her gaze to him. Annabelle looked at them confused. "I don't understand. Do you two know each other?" Tony nodded slowly. Betty hastened to add, "We've just crossed paths a couple times." What Betty couldn't say was that once upon a time, about 8 years ago, Tony had been whisked into town, and as luck would have it, to their beauty parlor. He needed to get himself cleaned up because, as he put it, his work was making his pigtails grow out. Betty and the other girls tried to explain to him that it was a women's salon, but Tony didn't want to listen to anyone. Then Betty, in order not to cause a scandal with such a client, volunteered to cut his hair. He left a very generous tip, and then apologized, said that the day was heavy, and then an hour later, negotiations. Apparently, the negotiation was over before Betty had wrapped up, because when she came out, Tony was waiting for her. Tony's never been much of a walker, but this time it was like he was hooked, and Betty didn't let men near her. But she figured they were newcomers, so no one owed anyone anything. They only met 3 times, and then Tony went back to his town. Betty had done her best to put him out of her mind. And now he was standing in front of her, staring at him in confusion. thinking that 5 minutes ago it had seemed to her that their problem was of universal proportions, but now it had swelled to unexplainable proportions. Everyone sat down at the table, Lily and Casey keeping their eyes on each other. Annabelle was immediately joined by a teacher. "I think it's better for the girls to go for a walk, to talk, while we are solving adult problems here." Neither Casey nor Lily argued. They went down the stairs, and the last thing Annabelle heard was, "What kind of ice cream do you like?" "I like pistachio." "You're kidding, I only eat that too." Annabelle smiled. "How much less rules, 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 rules." In a second, Annabelle was already seated at the table. "Well, who's gonna start?" Tony raised his hand. "Let's go, me, Casey, mine, my daughter, and my spouse. I watched her the whole pregnancy. We went to the doctors together. So we have nothing criminal. I'm sure science has many explanations for this similarity." Betty nodded. "I'd like to support Tony. We took Lily in at the orphanage. Would anyone really believe that Tony's family separated the children? I'm sure there's an explanation. Let me tell you why we're here then." Tony looked at his former housekeeper. "Yeah, Annabelle, I'd like to know why we're here. My aunt has been a midwife all her life." Betty listened attentively, Tony's head lowering as he talked. That was how he knew Lucy was capable of strange things. But to keep from telling him that his baby was dead, the man shifted his gaze to the girls, who were sitting on the bench and talking animatedly. When they were side by side, the resemblance was undeniable at all. Annabelle finished, then added, "It so happens that my aunt's remorse in your meeting coincided. Now I can tell her that there is nothing wrong with the other girl either. It's up to you, of course, whether you sue her or not, but she's not going to get a trial." Tony smiled sadly. "Why should she be sued? She made a few people happy, at least for a while. Wouldn't the girls be better off in an orphanage?" "Well, I guess I'll be going then. I have to go to my aunt's. You two probably have a lot to talk about." When she left, Tony felt confused. There was music and voices nearby, and he looked at Betty, confused. "What are we going to do now?" Betty didn't have time to answer, because a loud and somewhat indignant voice was heard nearby. "Tony, I've been looking for you. You can't just disappear like that. You don't have the right status." Nanny stood next to the table. Another time Tony would have been happy to see her, but not now. "Nanny, hello. I have the day off today, and I was planning on spending it with my daughter. What's up?" Nanny couldn't take her eyes off of Betty. Her insides were churning. So she'd been looking for ways to approach Tony for years, bit by bit, as they say. "You were planning a weekend away with your daughter and spend." Nanny bit her tongue, but it was too late. Tony's gaze turned icy. Everything she'd worked so hard to build between them crumbled in an instant. "Nanny, you're forgetting yourself." "I'm sorry, Tony, you've got it all wrong." Nanny hurried to leave, but when she came down the steps, she froze. There were two Caseys sitting right in front of her, though one was a little skinnier and not so brazen looking. The woman turned around, looked at the couple sitting at the table, and squinted angrily. That's the way to get the mayors off the mayor's back. She walked briskly down the path, making a plan in her head in case things didn't go the way she wanted. Casey gave Nanny an unkind look. Lily immediately asked, "Who's that?" "Dad's assistant who sleeps and dreams about coming to live in our house." "Why? She doesn't have her own place." Casey laughed. "Lily, come on. She wants to be the mayor's wife, which is my dad." Lily even blushed, and then laughed. "I take it she doesn't stand a chance." "I'm not going to let that happen." Tony finally looked at Betty. "Well, hello, Betty." "Hello, Tony." Betty averted her eyes in embarrassment. This was certainly someone she never thought she'd see again in her life. Lily's illness, her husband's leaving. Tony had been a breath of air, a kind of recharge. Betty clearly understood that it was a recharge and nothing else. As they said their goodbyes, Tony asked, "Will I see you again?" Betty then shrugged. "Why, we both took a little rest, relax on that, and that's all." He nodded in agreement. "Yes, you're right." At home, his wife and daughter were waiting for him. Yes, and in general, honestly speaking, Tony did not understand how everything came out. It was like something hit him in the head, so he decided to forget everything too. I guess we need to think about what we're gonna do next. We can't just walk away now because our girls will have too many questions. And it wouldn't be right. They're twins. Betty sighed. They'd been living peacefully, and now here they were. She didn't understand how things were going to work at all. How to explain to the girls that although they are sisters, they will have to live in different cities and different families. I don't know what to do, Lily, my daughter, that's all I can say. Tony looked grimly at Betty. And Casey, my daughter, that doesn't stop them being sisters. Betty nodded accordingly, and the man asked, Betty, where are you staying? Nowhere yet. I wasn't sure we'd be staying here longer than a day at all. Maybe to us we have a big house. There is enough room for everyone. There'll be time to think about what to do next. This is awkward. What will your wife say? Lucy died a few years ago, so apart from the housekeeper coming in, no one's ever there. When the girls found out they were going to Casey's, they jumped and squealed. Betty thought once more, sadly, that nothing would ever be the same. In the evening, when the girls were tucked up in Casey's room, Tony got out the wine. Betty, maybe we should have a little drink, so to speak, to ease the nervous system. Betty nodded. They sat down by the fireplace, and Tony spoke. You know, the biggest shock to me was that my wife didn't say anything to me. I mean, I lost my baby, but I live without knowing anything about it. I love Casey very much. She's my family. But how could she do that to me, and why didn't she take both girls? At one time we thought we would never have children. We went to all kinds of doctors. The last echo seemed to be a success. Lucy said when they did it that it was the last time. She said she wouldn't try again. Apparently it was desperate. Betty was quiet for a while. When I took Lily away, they told me the girl was sick and weak. I was willing to do anything, willing to treat her for the rest of her life. My husband, he was infertile, and so we decided to take the baby. Betty grinned sadly. Actually, it was his idea. I couldn't make up my mind for a long time. I kept thinking I wouldn't be able to love my child. As the years went by, I agreed. When I took Lily in my arms, I realized I'd do anything for her. It was love at first sight. Tony looked at her. And my husband lived with us for a while longer. When Lily grew up, he left, said he couldn't love her, and that I had to choose between Lily and him. Tony gasped. How could you put such a choice in front of a man? Betty shrugged. Well, there you go. Tony, I'm going to rest. I've got a lot on my mind today. Sure. Go on. Say, what about Lily's health? A heart defect. The doctor said it should go away with age, but for now we're on medication. The next day Tony left while everyone was still asleep. Nanny met him with a cold smile. She couldn't help herself. Next to Tony, she saw only herself, and here was some stranger. Good morning, Nanny. Get me the coordinates of the best pediatric cardiologist. He closed the door behind him, and the assistant stood there with her mouth hanging open. Is Casey sick? She better be. She's just a mess. Nanny pulled herself back, but thoughts came into her head. She took up the phones, then calmed down. Running errands for her boss was something she was very good at. BT decided that they would drive home tonight. After all, it was possible to agree on something over the phone. Though she wasn't going to agree on anything, and she wouldn't change anything, the girls could be friends from a distance. She really wanted to leave because Tony's presence near her was agitating her. Betty berated herself for the nonsense that was going through her head. They didn't have any relationship to reminisce about, just encounters on a physiological level. An inner voice whispered nastily, there were plenty of people who wanted to meet you on that level. Somehow you turned them all down, but he didn't. But Betty's plan was not to be. After lunch, which, by the way, they prepared together with the girls, Tony arrived. Betty, get ready, we're waiting for a very good pediatric cardiologist to see Lily. Betty wanted to say no, but then she changed her mind. There's no need for an unnecessary consultation. The doctor insisted on a tighter examination. They had to stay a few more days, and then the doctor summoned them to his office. I have nothing to please you. More often than not, these problems end when the child is in transition age. But in very rare cases, probably 1 in 5,000, they, on the contrary, worsen. That's exactly how your little girl's disease progressed. BT looked at the doctor confusedly, but the doctor spoke. I understand you. If you doubt my competence, then ask the doctor who is seeing you to schedule an examination rather than waiting for things to go away. What should we do? We have to operate. We can do that here, But you realize the heart is not the stomach. It's very risky. What if we don't do the surgery? You don't have to. Lily won't die like in the TV series, but her lifestyle will be very different from her peers. And of course, any nervous shock, too much, fatigue, and many other factors could be fatal. Can we think about it? Of course, they left the clinic. And then Tony spoke. Betty, it's up to you, of course, but think about it. This is an opportunity to give Lily a chance to live like everyone else, to run around, to have fun. I understand. Betty wiped away her tears. She tried not to think about anything bad. That evening, she talked to Lily. The girl's eyes lit up at once. Mommy, I'm going to be allowed on the highest carousel, and Casey and I have decided to go rock climbing. No sigh, Betty, daughter is right. She wants to live a full life. In the morning at breakfast, Tommy watched the news and suddenly froze. Betty froze too. She asked to give the housekeeper a day off, saying that she would at least cook so that she could repay her living expenses. The local news was on the TV and they were showing their girls. The announcer was cheerful. It looks like our mayor or his wife had a stony youth. What's unclear is why we only know about one child. The answer is simple. Just then, the cardiac clinic where Lily was coming out of appeared on the screen, and the announcer's voice reached a climax. It's simple. The second girl is sick, and it looks like the parents just gave up on her. Before the announcer could even finish speaking, Tony's phone rang. Of course, it was Hugh. Tony, what's going on in there? Morning, Hugh. Nothing's going on. Are you watching TV? Of course I do, and I'm even going to sue the press for libel. The governor slowed down a bit. I'm waiting for you at my place. As soon as you can, you're on your way. Tony disconnected the phone, sighed. I have to go to the region, Betty said frustratedly. Jesus, now you're in trouble because of us. Nonsense. It's here and it's a shame, of course, that Lily won't be able to meet. Who knew? What kind of technology? I thought that after heart surgery in the hospital, almost half a year to lie down. Tony was glad that Lily was doing well, but also upset because he realized that they no longer had anything to keep them in this city, which meant that very soon they would have to part. Tony was very used to having two Caseys running around the house. He realized, of course, that the other was Lily, but they looked so much alike. He was used to their eager conversations in the kitchen with Betty. He had to stay a little longer in the region. After the conversation with the governor, which, by the way, somehow even brought them closer together, there were still urgent matters. He didn't worry about Casey. He knew that Betty would manage, and he flew home as if on wings. It had been a long time since he felt like he had a whole family waiting for him at home. Tony stopped in front of the door. Family, well, of course. Only now did he realize why they all felt so good in the house. Because they felt like family. That was the whole clue. You don't have to figure things out. You just have to be a family. Betty would be the best wife ever. He really hoped the woman wouldn't say no to him. And anyway, this was about Betty. Not as a hostess or a mother, but as a woman. But why did it take so long to get to him after all, since the second time they'd met, not long ago? He already knew he didn't want to let her go. And it wasn't even because of Lily at all. Tony opened the door. The house was unaccustomedly quiet. He walked into the room. Casey was sitting quietly on the couch. Hey, Casey, where's everyone? Casey looked at him with tear-filled eyes. Daddy, they left. They went all the way home. What home? So, Daddy, why did you do anything to make them stay? You could have. I know you could have, because you don't care about anybody. You don't care about anyone or anything but your job. He couldn't think of anything to say to his daughter, so he raised his voice. Casey, now, calm down. Casey wiped her eyes. That's right, Daddy. How else can you hide your wrongdoing without yelling at your child? Casey disappeared into her room. Tony stared at Casey's door in confusion. In the evening, Casey did not come out of her room. Tony knocked on her door. Casey, let's go to dinner. Thanks, Daddy, I don't feel like it. He didn't eat either. Tony never thought he would be so lonely without Betty and Lily. He didn't sleep much at night, wondering what Betty was doing now, if she remembered him. Casey came out for breakfast calm. Tony couldn't help himself. Casey, have you talked to Lily? How are they doing? They're fine, Dad. Casey finished her tea, got up. See you tonight, Daddy. Daughter's gone. Tony felt as if he was to blame for her, and not just her, but everyone. He pounded his fist on the table. Hell, after all, I'm a grown man and I can afford to do what I want. He caught up with Cassie, already at the school gate, stopping beside her. His daughter looked at him in surprise. Daddy, is something wrong? You're right, it did, but not today. Get in the car. Why? Where are we going? We're going to Betty and Lily's. Casey stared at him for a few seconds, then jumped in the car and hugged her father. Daddy, this is the right thing to do. Betty stirred the tea, set the cookies on the table. Lily, the tea is ready. The daughter entered the kitchen, sat down on the sofa. Mommy, I don't really want tea. Lily, you need to eat well, and you don't eat anything at all now. Lily took the mug, took a sip. Mommy, when do you think I'll see Casey again? Betty was confused. She was not ready to answer such questions now because her soul was bleeding. I don't know, daughter. You see, there are certain circumstances. Are those circumstances you and Tony? Betty was embarrassed. No, of course not. It's just that life is so complicated. Mom, life is complicated, but I think you grown-ups like to make things complicated, even when things are simple. I mean, we saw something going on between you two, and you pretended it wasn't. Betty stroked Lily's head. Daughter, when you get older, you'll understand. Tony's the mayor. He's in the public eye. He's a different kind of person, if you can call it that. Their family's on TV a lot. You and I are different. Anyway, such different people can't have anything in common. Mom, but that's not right. It's about people, not where they are or what they do. Betty didn't have time to answer because the doorbell rang. Mommy, I'll get it. Betty nodded, stood up, looked out the window. It was strange. They had the same car in their yard, just like Tony's. She hadn't seen it before. Maybe? Betty shook her head. Such pipe dreams. Hello. The woman flinched, turned slowly. Tony stood beside her. Betty, I can make it. I'm after you. Marry me. We'll have 2 daughters and the happiest life in the world. Betty couldn't say anything. She looked at Tony and tears ran down her cheeks. Tony held her tight against him. That's it. Don't say anything else. 2 hours to pack. We'll figure out the rest later. Nanny dialed Tony's number for the umpteenth time. She really didn't like it when the mayor was out of her sight. Of course, she had no right to control him, but every time he disappeared for even an hour, she thought he was with another woman who could be a danger to her. Finally, Tony picked up the phone. Nanny listened to some rustling for a few seconds, and then Tony finally spoke. Hello, Nanny, is something wrong? No, but I need to know where you are, don't I? In case something happens. Nanny listened sensitively to every sound that came through the receiver. I'm in town, Nanny. I'm standing outside the registry office. At the registry office? Apparently, Nanny's voice changed because Tony hurried to say, Nanny, of course you'll be the guest of honor at my wedding. Nanny threw the phone on the floor. She was ready to cry. For so many years she had been preparing for the registry office Tony would take her to. In 2 months, the governor himself visited their town. It was a big occasion. The mayor of Washington, D.C. was getting married. The occasion was grand. And when Tony told Hugh that he and Betty wouldn't want a lavish celebration, he resented it. No way. It's not every day we have a mayor getting married, much less good measures. Betty was beautiful. Tony looked at her in a kind of mute amazement. He had seen that Betty was good-looking before, but now he realized that he had never met a prettier woman. Lily and Casey stood beside them. They were dressed in identical lush dresses, and people were whispering. No one could understand how people who were just about to get married had girls who looked very similar to each other like 2 drops of water. I now pronounce you husband and wife. The words sounded so solemn that even Nanny could hardly hold back her tears, and then the deputy mayor held out a handkerchief. Nanny looked at him in surprise. He had come to work for them quite recently. Unless Nanny was mistaken, he was single. She smiled. Thank you so much. You are so gentle. It takes one to be so happy for strangers. Nanny smiled contentedly. Come on, can people who work together be outsiders? The man gave her his elbow, and Nanny willingly put her hand on his. There must have been so much happiness in the new family that it was enough for everyone around them.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.